Get started.
Okay, great. All right, so this is, let you kind of introduce yourself. This is one of our alumni, Christine Anderson. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Christine Anderson. I got my associate's degree from North Hennepin Community College in 1998, and I finished my degree through the Northwestern Focus Program in 2002, and then I came back and got my Master's of Business Administration in the end of 2017. And I work for the Minnesota Department of Education, and I have about 20 years of experience in education finance.
Great. So how did you get started? How did you get your first job after you graduated?
Well, when I was finishing my master's degree, the company that I worked for started laying people off. And so I decided I needed to look for another job. And out of the blue, an email job posting from Indeed showed up in my inbox, and I was not subscribed to Indeed at the time. And it was for a job at the Minnesota Department of Education that fit my experience and my education, like it was, the job posting was written for me. So I applied for it and went and interviewed and got the job. And I really enjoy working at the department.
Great. And how long have you been at the Minnesota Department of Education now?
I started, I've been there for about 1.5 years.
Okay, great. So what skills did you bring in particular to the job that was such a good fit?
Well, I think having really good Excel and database design skills were probably the most beneficial. I also have some experience with Tableau data visualization, which we're just trying to start to implement now. But it's mostly, a lot of it was just all of the years of working with education data that I have in the position that I have now. And before I started looking for a job, I enrolled in a financial modeling certification program, and the classes were very Excel based, and they really helped me up my game with Excel and gave me some real good best practices for structuring financial models.
Okay, great. So just like briefly, what do you do in your current job?
Well, we calculate more than $7 billion of entitlements that fund the schools in the state of Minnesota. So I'm in the general education funding section, and there are several different kinds of calculations that we do. So we have a mainframe program that does the basic calculations, and we have to do all the programming for that. So we do that, and then we also do several offline calculations that get put into that. So it's a lot of data modeling. We do all of the pupil forecasts and the financial projections that the state uses for the education budget. And I would say a typical day for me, it just kind of depends upon what we're working on at the time, but it's mostly a lot of working with creating and updating data models. We have meetings to discuss methodology and to present data, and we have to take calls from school districts and that type of thing when they have questions, and charter schools when they have questions about their funding. And a lot of troubleshooting sometimes, especially when we're working on the report programming. So things change from year to year, and so sometimes it can be real challenging to get the programming part of it right.
Yeah. Is there a lot of back and forth and, kind of group discussion about how these are going to be constructed? Or, I mean, does it get political at all in your group? Or is that taken care of ahead of time?
All of the funding formulas are, and the funding is set by the legislature. Okay. So we have to take a look at what they're doing, right? So what the laws that they've passed, but then also a lot of times what we end up having to do is during a legislative session, we do fiscal notes. So anytime they have a proposed change to the funding, then we have to model that out to say this is what it's going to cost, or this is what it's going to save. so the legislature has some idea of the impact, the financial impact.
Okay, so whenever we're getting news reports that this new bill is passing and this is what it's going to cost, your group is the one coming up
We're the
with
ones,
that.
right? We're the ones who do that.
Great.
At least for the general education part of it.
Okay.
There are other sections that, special education and some different funding areas as well that are more of the categorical.
What do you say is the best part of your job?
I kind of live for process improvement, so I have a lot of opportunity at this state to streamline some of our data models and make them more transparent. And I really enjoy the problem solving aspect of this job. It's like assembling puzzles with data.
That's great. And and what we're hearing from employers is that's the number one skill that employers are looking for is critical thinking and problem solving. So that's great. That's a big part of your job. What's the most challenging part of your job?
Well, before COVID started, I would say that my biggest challenge was working with some of the antiquated data structures at the state and also the lack of documentation. So my department had 2 vacant positions. One was on the verge of being filled. And then in June, another member of our team resigned. So now it's me and my supervisor doing the work that had been done by 4 people in the past, or actually 5 last year. And so that lack of documentation creates a lot of confusion when we don't necessarily know what it was or how it was that the other people had done the things that they did. And so we probably spent a lot of time recreating the wheel on some things. Sure. But hopefully when we do it, we end up doing it better. And I've been trying to spend some time documenting the processes that I use in order to come up with the calculations. And then the other challenge is just all those legislative proposals. So we end up having to do those fiscal notes, and the legislature likes to include a lot of exceptions. So it adds an extra layer of complexity to the data models. And so then we're expecting, for example, with this next legislative session to have a lot of changes due to COVID.
Okay. So you've got to interpret all that data and then figure out what all the exceptions mean and
right. Yeah.
Also.
So it's very looking at the legislation very critically and taking it from the wording that they have into the actual calculations that we need to do to fund the schools.
Interesting. So if a student wanted to apply to the Department of Education in your area, how would they make themselves stand out? What do they look for?
Well, applying to government jobs is really different than corporate jobs. With government hiring rules, you need to specifically address each of the job requirements on your resume. So if your resume doesn't address those, it will probably get rejected. Okay. So in order to even get the chance to be considered, you need to make sure to tailor your resume to the job. And then I would say also mirror the wording on the job requirements and show how your experience, whether it's job experience, school experience, volunteer experience, fits those requirements. And then once you've met the requirements, I think you can really make yourself stand out by showing how you can add value to over the requirements of the position. So they gave me a case study to prepare and present. And so I spent, being really detail oriented to go through that case study and make sure that I had a real good presentation for it.
That's great. What skills are necessary for somebody to be successful in your field?
Well, I would say for what I do, the position that I have requires a master's degree, and it also requires some experience. And so just getting the experience that's necessary, I would say take a look to see if you have an interest in working in a government job. You won't necessarily start out at the level that I'm at, but you can work up to that and just getting some good experience. And it's the job functions that you find in government in the business positions are fairly similar to corporate functions, whether it's data management or accounting or financial analysis. So those skills are portable to government work. And you might not make the same salaries that you would in the private sector, but I have no doubt that my work contributes to society in a real meaningful way.
That's great. If somebody wanted, a student were starting out in this type of career, what advice would you give them?
I would say get some private sector experience. And then you can look for internships. I know that it's really hard right now to find internships because of the pandemic, because so many of us are working at home. But you know, some places will have some virtual internships. And if you're interested in working for the government, kind of know your heart. Know the what are the things that where you feel you want to make an impact, and then look for some experiences, you know, like I said, whether it's, you know, corporate work, whether it's school work, whether it's volunteer work, where you can get some experience.
Great, great. How did your time at Northwestern prepare you for your role now?
Well, I did the MBA program, and a lot of the people who have my position have master's degrees in other fields. But I think the analytical skills that I developed in working with some of the corporate type of data, I think was a real help for me. Mm-hmm. And I think just getting that credential and working for that helped me really up my game and my professionalism.
Okay. Can you tell us about any mentors you've had, or anybody who's kind of opened the door for you for your career?
Well, when I first started decided I needed to look for a new job after having been in the same job for about 20 years, I found somebody who helped me write my resume, write my LinkedIn, because I hadn't done that for so long, and did some job coaching with me. And we ended up just becoming really great friends. And so I think she was probably the most helpful for me. I had worked, you know, basically for the same company, and I worked remote for 20 years. So it was kind of difficult, you know, to get like really close relationships with some of my coworkers. But there have been other people along the way who have really encouraged me, and some of my clients when at my old job were very encouraging. So,
good. How has your faith been challenged or strengthened in your career now?
Well, I think it's easy to think that my faith would only be challenged by, you know, the big things in events. And I know people who have professed to be Christian but act unethically in their business. And in fact, I resigned from one position because of that. But I actually find that living my faith is most challenged by the little things, because, you know, people can be annoying, and it's real easy to, you know, to turn around and snap at somebody when I'm stressed. So I have to be purposeful and mindful in my interactions. So I treat others with grace and humility. And I make mistakes. And so sometimes I also have to extend that grace to myself. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, her faith taught me that kindness is a superpower. And so I strive to make sure that my faith is reflected in my words and my actions.
Great. Any last words of advice or anything else you'd want to say to our students?
Well, I think that it's real necessary to have people with faith and really good intentions working in government. And so it's, you know, may not be something that a lot of students think that that's what they want to do when they're, you know, in business school or going for accounting. But we have CPAs and other people who came from the private sector. And so I think having just, you know, really quality individuals in government is, especially in this day and age, is just really important. People with integrity.
Great.